Hello, everyone. My name is Devin Boyda, and I am the summarizer for Team 2, Presentation 1. I'll be covering some different types of rhetoric during my speech, as well as sophists and philosophers and the Republic by Plato. So real quick, I want to talk a little bit about rhetoric. So a lot of people just consider it persuasive writing, and it is, but I'd also like to say that I think it's closer to an art form than anything else. We've all seen people that have a way with their words. Imagine any of the most influential speeches in history and tell me that if you think that you'd be able to give that speech with the same level of power or passion. It takes a long time to become that charismatic, and that's why I would consider it an art form that requires mastering like any other form of art. So we're going to be looking at three different types of rhetoric: and deliberative, judicial, and epidictic. And I won't go into too much detail on this slide because the next couple slides will go into more detail. So we're looking at deliberative rhetoric right now. So this will be persuading or dissuading. It's kind of a general rhetoric and is based more towards the future. Um, you see this during presentations, political speeches, whenever you want to call to action something that's to come, or dissuade people not to do said thing. That deliberative rhetoric would be the one you're looking for. Next, we have judicial rhetoric. So it's in the name, judicial justice, and it's typically for defending or accusing. So this is going to be with the past tense, defending someone's actions or accusing them of said action. And this is found primarily in the courtroom setting. Next, we have epidictic rhetoric. We got some hands-on practice with that in this class. And this is going to be blaming or praising. Focuses on the now, the present, and most times you'll see epidictic speeches, since it's praise in like eulogies, ceremonies, nominations, funerals. Anytime you want to talk nice about someone, this is where you would see an epidictic rhetoric performed. So a little bit about sophists and philosophers through his history. We'll start with Gorgias, who we read some of his work in class, and he was the first generation sophist, followed up by Isocrates and Socrates, who were also sophists. And at that point, we see a transition over into the philosophers who, for example, Plato, Aristotle, and St. Augustine. So my audience question to everyone is, what would the difference be between sophists and philosophers in Plato's opinion? I know that like in general, we would know what the difference is, but like Plato has a very particular way of looking at it. And also, what category do you fall into? Are you leaning more sophist or philosopher? So now we're going to look at the Republic by Plato. So just a general idea of what the book was about. It was just his idea of a perfect nation. He had key focuses on justice throughout and government control and all things. On top of that, the hierarchy of it was of like supreme importance, and just tiers and responsibilities to go with the orderliness of it. Um, Plato related his government structures to that of the structures of our souls. That's the way he liked to look at it. So like some notable authoritarian governments in human history could be Egypt, Venezuela, Argentina. And it was just the societal norms, or cultural norms rather, that they were broken up into categories. So to continue on to the societal hierarchy of what I was previously talking about. So this was the basic structure. He wanted a philosopher king, and then below that, lords, and then guardians, and then peasants, traditionally gatherers, farmers, anyone with like, you know, uh, hands-on skill that I guess would be considered lesser than, the king or the lord. And order and control, of course, were the key attributes to this government that he wanted. So they would, try to keep control in any way that they could. That was the biggest thing. So a little discussion about Plato's video. So the most important thing to Plato, besides the government ideology, was of absolute truth. This was essentially why he hated rhetoric, because people could just manipulate anything into seeming true. So that just clearly conflicts with his ideologies. Rhetoric could be considered dangerous because of this. An example of this would be you'd have two people arguing, and one is telling the truth while the other's just talented in rhetoric. It's very possible the rhetorician would win the argument by simply being more convincing. And so Plato despised it. So I'll follow this up with some audience questions. So, what freedoms would you give up to make a better society, if any, keeping in mind the authoritarianism that Plato wanted? Like, what freedoms would you be willing to sacrifice if it were to make society better as a whole? And how well do you think this model works for countries that currently employ it, like the ones I mentioned? I don't know if there's any at current, but Egypt in the past was clearly authoritarian. And what do you think the best model for government is currently? I mean, there's always room for improvement, but what do you think is the best as of right now? Well, thank you for watching my slides. Goodbye.